So what are we going to do with the moon? How are we going to understand the moon in a natal chart? I'd like to ask you for the moment to ignore what you normally have been told or normally would be told about the moon, or forget what you already know. I'm going to give you a few points and suggest that you take them and build on them. You won't go wrong, and at the same time, if you suspend other meanings that you've learned, that'll be good. I'm not saying that they're necessarily wrong, but they may not be helpful or compatible with the approach that I'm taking with the moon here. Because I want to say that the moon is the mind or the mental personality. So it shows how you learn. So for example, if you have the moon in a fixed sign, you get used to one way of doing something, and it's hard to change the habit. So we shouldn't expect them or you, if you have the moon in that position, to adapt quickly. It's the kind of situation where you can't easily change. So let's say you go to the store and you always get the peanut butter, which is on the bottom shelf of aisle 3 on the right. Then they redo the store, so the peanut butter is now top left on aisle 7. It'll take you several weeks of going to the wrong place, the normal place, until you can reprogram yourself, so to speak, to go to the new location for the peanut butter on aisle 7. And that's what it's like to have the moon in a fixed sign. You get used to a way of doing things, it's hard to change. So let's say you're living in the US and you're going to England where they drive on the other side of the road. It's not going to be easy for you to automatically adjust to driving on the left. I have to think for a moment. We drive here in North America on the right. Okay, so in Britain they drive on the left. So some people, if you have the moon in a cardinal or a mutable sign, you can adapt much more quickly. But with the moon in a fixed sign, that type of activity is not easy for you. So if we're serious about astrology, and really that's the only way to be with this particular subject, we ought not to expect people to produce what they can't produce. So if you have the moon in a fixed sign, or if you have a child or a husband or wife with the moon in a fixed sign, understand and cooperate with the fact that they need time to learn. So you have to be patient with them. On the other hand, somebody with a cardinal sign moon learns quickly. But we shouldn't expect them to remember, since they can forget equally quickly. So what we're doing is we're understanding from the moon and the sun how people actually function. And we should learn as much as or the more we learn, the better off we'll be. We can also look at the moon as what you bring into life from the past. Or maybe we could see it as your genetic inheritance. And it's quite useful, though maybe it's too outrageous for some people, to think of the moon as representing your past lives or your last life. I don't expect that everybody's going to be taken with the idea of the possibility of past lives, but it can give you an idea of how something works if you consider the moon as your last life. So for instance, let's say you have the moon in Leo, and we know that Leo is the king. This would mean, or possibly mean, that you were a king in your last life. So you, in this lifetime, you expect to be able to give orders and have them obeyed. And that is how you automatically function. Trouble is that lots of people, you're not the king anymore. And so people don't, when you say jump, they don't automatically say, how high, sir, or madam. So with the moon in Leo, it also means that you're never wrong, because, you're the king, and this is how you think. So there may be no such thing as past lives, but if you think along these lines, it can show how a person functions. And similarly with the moon in Capricorn, then in your last life you began at the bottom and you worked your way to the top on your own. And maybe not the top, but 1 or 2 steps below the top, because there are what C.C. Zane calls safety urges with Capricorn. And maybe you want to be the power behind the throne, which is safer than being the throne, which is more vulnerable. So with a Capricorn moon, we should remember that the moon represents the past. It's what you do well, because you've done it before, but it's also what's meant to be left behind. So with the moon in Capricorn, you think you need to do everything on your own, but you don't anymore in this lifetime. It's okay to get help. So if you think of the moon as the past, this can be useful with solar returns. A solar return is a chart for the year, and it's calculated for the time and the date that the sun returns to the same degree, minute and second where it was when you were born.